بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين والصلاة والسلام على خير خلق الله أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ذلك ومن يعظم شعائر الله فإنها من تقوى القلوب. Please recite as-salawat. Respected listeners, my dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Do you know when did the very first properly organized Majlis of Imam Hussein take place and where? The very first Majlis. Well, it took place in the heart of the Umayyads, the capital of the Umayyads, next to the palace of Yazid in Damascus. When the Ahlul Bayt were brought to Damascus as prisoners, they were given a place in Damascus. That's where Sayyida Zainab salamullahi alayha and Sayyidul Sajideen alayhi salam, they organized the very first morning ceremony, a gathering, a majlis or azadari. Subhanallah, in the heart of the capital of Yazid, Majlis of Hussein started. That is for the first time when the women of the Umayyads started to come to that gathering, those gatherings which lasted for, according to some narration, 7 days, and some narrations say 3 days. They lasted for so many days, and women of the Umayyads, they started attending those gatherings, first wearing ordinary clothes, colorful clothes, and eventually started wearing black clothes. Those majlises were the very first properly organized majlises where people wore black clothes. And that laid the foundations of azadari. However, since then, azadari has gone through different stages and has evolved and changed. And today, it has spread out all across the world. And today, there is hardly any country where Majlis of Imam Hussein is not taking place. Hardly any language in which the azadari is not taking place. But throughout this evolution, things have also come into the azadari that did not exist back then. Definitely, certainly. Therefore, nowadays, from time to time, this question is raised by non-Shia as well as many Shia people. Are our rituals of azadari in line with the sunnah of the Ahlul Bayt or not? Are the rituals of azadari distorted? Has the azadari been distorted and we're doing something that we should not be doing? Maybe we are doing something that is actually bad in the name of azadari. Is that the case? This is what I'm going to talk about today. But in order to talk about the distortions thoroughly, comprehensively, looking at it from different angles, first we need to understand what are the origins of azadari. Therefore, I have carefully selected the topic of today's lecture, the rituals of Ashura, origins and distortions. This is the topic of today's lecture, and very important topic. And what you are going to learn during the next 45 to 50 minutes or so is the following. First of all, what do we mean by Azadari and the rituals of Azadari today? Very briefly, a couple of minutes, what are the different aspects of Azadari? What are the different things that we do in Azadari, first of all? After that, how did the A'immah organize Azadari? How did the A'immah do that? After that, I will talk about those main elements of Azadari, how they evolved throughout the history, and I'll use one case study. The case study is India. India, how Azadari evolved in India, and what kind of things influenced the different elements of Azadari in India. That's what I'll spend some time, and that would be a very important discussion, especially because Indian Azadari has a great influence on rituals of Ashura all across the world, all the way to Caribbean, to Africa, parts of Europe, and many different places. And that's why I've selected India as a case study. After that, 10 or 15 minutes or so, what do we mean by distortions? And what could be the pitfalls when doing Azadari that we need to avoid? And then I'll spend quite some time today talking about history and reciting a detailed eulogy of Hazrat Qasim ibn al-Hasan alayhim as-salam, inshallah. But before I proceed, wherever you are, you who are blessed to be present here and those who are blessed to be watching this program online, from the bottom of your heart, please recite a beautiful, synchronized and loud salawat. So, so Azadari or gatherings of mourning, what is it? And what are the key elements of it? Today, Azadari can be broadly categorized into three things. There are three elements of Azadari. Although colloquially speaking, Aza or Azadari, especially in the communities of Pakistani and Indian origin, Azadari usually means chest beating, latmiya and nauha. However, Azadari as a whole consists of three things. First, the speech, the Majlis itself. Colloquially, we call it Majlis, the lecture, the speech. First, the most important element of Azadari is the speech itself. After that, the rituals related to the latmiya, nauha, marthiya, and chest beating, and those rituals. The third thing is the artistic exhibition of the Ashura related memories, like ta'ziyah, shabih of replica of Dhul Janah, alam, tabut, coffin, and those kind of things. So these are three things, we can say broadly speaking, they form Azadari today. Now, before I talk about how they have evolved and get into the case study, first, how did the A'immah do Azadari? What kind of circumstances they lived in? You see, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, right after Karbala, the Imam lived under extreme oppression of the Umayyads. So Azadari, although it started in Damascus and started to create upheaval in the society, and therefore Yazid said, now they shouldn't stay in Damascus, they should go. So they left Damascus, they went to Medina. And then the first majlis started in Medina at the house of Mu'mineen, Salama. She started the first majlis in Medina. Now, these majlises were taking place, but not very organized, because eventually the Umayyads really started to oppress the Ahlul Bayt and the Shia a lot. Although initially the majlises started in Damascus and Medina, but not that freely. But still the A'immah continued the majalis with the key aim to tell the people what happened in Karbala. All the focus was on the calamities, the bloodshed, the zulm, the injustice. It was all about tears, tears, tears. But those tears had a great purpose. The tears of Sayyid al-Sajideen were not merely tears. Those tears had the purpose and the meaning that the world should know why Sayyid al-Sajideen laments like that, why the women of the Ahlul Bayt lament like that. And it made sense that azadari at that time was purely aza, only mourning, mourning, mourning. Extremely important element that is the foundation of all majalis of Hussein and shall remain. Now, after that, Imam Baqir alayhi salam and Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam both used to organize majalis at their homes. Because also eventually the Umayyads became a little bit weaker, and the Abbasids started to come to the power, so they got some time. And they started to organize majalis at their home. And we see in the narrations that no one saw the Imams smile or laugh when they saw the crescent of Muharram. And they would invite poets to come and recite the eulogies for Imam Hussein alayhi salam and his companions at their home. I would hang a curtain between men and women and would ask the women of their families to sit and listen to those eulogies. And they would also give gifts and money to those poets so that they would come and recite the eulogies. So this is what we find in the narrations. They organized those majalis. 3 Imams in particularly are mentioned in the narrations. Imam al-Baqir, Imam al-Sadiq and Imam al-Rida alayhim as-salam. Please recite a salawat. So these Imams got a little bit more opportunity and freedom to organize the azadari. But what we hear is that it was eulogy, it was tears, it was masa'ib, and that's it. Mostly that. So this is how the Imams, and I'm not going to get into the details because there are many other details and political details, but I'm going to stop it here and then ask the question, how has our azadari evolved since then and in which direction? And first of all, Majlis. First of all, Majlis, how has it evolved? Because as I said, initially it was only girya, ashk, tears, crying. And some people say today that Majlis should be only that, because the Imams used to do it that way. Well, fair point from their point of view. If the Imams used to do Majlis that way, who are you to come here with all sorts of wishy-washy subjects, mental health, this, that, all these types of topics? Isn't it going against the sunnah of the Imams? But then the thing is that majalis have evolved over the years into a university in itself, an arena for the believers to learn about the aqaid, to learn about the fadail of the Ahlul Bayt, because those majalis at the house of Imam al-Sadiq were not full of Narai Haidaris, by the way. They were not chanting Narai Haidaris. They were not standing up and doing wah, 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 wah. Because that you accept. But when we bring modern topics, you say you are going against the sunnah of the Imam. They didn't have those fadail like we have today. So things evolve. Muharram became a great arena for the believers to learn about the aqaid, to learn about the fiqh, to learn about the Quran, to learn about the akhlaq, and also discuss their political and social issues. And it should be like this, as long as we haven't taken the masa'ib part out of it. If someone says, I will only discuss the social dilemmas and modern topics, and what is this tears and stuff? It's outdated, we don't need it anymore. You are wrong. And I'll get back to the distortions in a bit, but first evolution of majlises. So that's the first thing. It has become an arena for learning and education. And it's a mustahab act. It's not a usuluddin or zururiyatuddin that we have altered the salat the way Imam Sadiq used to recite. You get the point? Have we altered salat? It's not salat. It's a spiritual ritual and activity whose purpose is to make us become better and get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the wasila of Hussein, and get better human beings and solve our problems and issues and find peace at heart. That's it. As long as we don't exclude the masa'ib, because that is the foundation of it, and it has great spiritual significance. That's why the A'immah used to say, cry for Hussein, cry for Hussein. And Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said, crying for the calamity of my grandfather Hussein washes away greater sins. It has a spiritual significance, great spiritual significance that we cannot overlook or undermine. And believe me, I'm telling you from the bottom of my heart, I gave scientific presentations. I have even covered political events and worked as a freelance journalist. I gave speeches on different occasions, Jashan, Wilada, but God knows the spiritual pleasure I get while reciting the masa'ib of Sayyid al-Shuhada and his companions, I don't find in anything else. It is the most beautiful activity in my point of view, because those tears have a great value. That whole atmosphere, that whole activity on a spiritual level, on a psychological level, religiously, according to fiqh, and the beauty of it we will see on the Day of Judgment. Before I get carried away, the evolution of the majalis and then azadari, latmiya, and the rituals. The Imams did not have latmiya and nauha the way we do nowadays. Definitely they did not. And the Imams also did not have tabut, alam, shabih of Dhul Janah, and those things, tazia, they did not. No, these are the cultural aspects of azadari. These are not wajibat, first of all, because the Imams didn't do it. These are not wajibat. Matam sine zani is not wajib. Ta'ziyah, tabut, alam, things, these replicas are not wajib. These are cultural aspects that people have adopted throughout the history that can help them feel closer to Imam Hussein alayhi salam and imagine the calamity he went through. That's it. These are wasila, wasail that are not at the core. At the core is love for Hussein. These things are at the periphery. At the core is the Husseini spirit of La ilaha illallah. And what Quran says, An'ibudullah wajtanibut taghut. Worship Allah and avoid false gods. Taghut. That is the core of Majlis Hussein. Everything else is in the periphery. When I get back to distortions, I'll talk more about it, but just making this point. So evolution, case study India. You see, before I talk about India, the very first proper azadari did not start for a very long time after the 12 imams, after the occultation started. For the very first time, on public level, grand scale, azadari took place when the Buyid dynasty, which was Ale Buya, they took over power in parts of Iran, eastern Iran, southern Iran, and parts of Iraq. And they used to be Zaydiya Shia first, but then they became 12er Shia. And then they, for the very first time in Baghdad, organized azadari. And they said, close all the shops, everyone wears black clothes, grand scale azadari, Ale Buya. That started a couple of 100 years after. We are talking about 4th, 5th century of Hijri calendar. Then they started, and their government lasted, their kingdom lasted for 130 or so years. In those times, azadari spread in Iraq and parts of Iran, and Shias were living in pockets here and there. Then the Safavids came, and then it became more and more permanent, and it spread all across Iran and became really strong, and many rituals were adapted from the Zoroastrian people. That cultural influence came into Iranian azadari, but I'm not getting there because my case study is India. Now, some Iranian Sadat emigrated to India about 300 years ago. And they were powerful and influential people, and they became the Nawab of Awadh. Awadh was a state, a big area, bordering Nepal and Bihar and along the Ganges River, very big area. And they made Faizabad city as their capital. Iranian Sadat. Their capital became Faizabad, and later they moved it to Lucknow. Just about 5-6 minutes, very interesting history. I'm condensing it. It is so beautiful, I'm condensing it. You see, India was a big, almost a continent. It's called subcontinent. Today, India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, they three used to be one country. Now, these parts of India, the north of India and more east of Pakistan today, that's where they had this kingdom. And that was the epicenter of Shia culture. The Shia were all across the subcontinent. For example, in the Saraiki regions of Pakistan, a big area from part of my ancestors are. Huge area, big Shia population, and Sadat had moved from Bukhara, from Uzbekistan, and they had started living in those areas, so the Shia also lived there. But they were relatively simpler people living in deserts, villages, doing their own azadari. We don't know much how they did azadari at that time because it's not well researched and documented. But what we know is that they were not as advanced in rituals as the people in Lucknow. Those Iranians came there, they were rich people, and Lucknow became epicenter of Shia. People from Delhi, Shia who were in Delhi, they moved to Lucknow from different places. But still, it was the Hindus who were in the majority in Lucknow. Now the Nawab or the Duke, he wanted to keep peace in the society. And he wanted the Hindus and the Sunnis and the Shias, everyone live in perfect harmony. And that's what they created. And Imam Hussein was a perfect arena for that. In those days, no one asked, you are Sunni, you are Hindu, you are Buddhist, you are Sikh. Everyone came, and the government, they organized azadari. And the Hindus became very interested. Hindus by nature, because they have an inherent humility. They have an inherent humility. They worship everything. Everything that can benefit them, they revere it and worship it. they started making vows at the Majlis of Hussein. Lucknow city, now the Hindus' influence started to increase. They would wear black clothes, they would make another, they would recite poetry. They would recite poetry. Before, Persian was the language of the Muslims, but then a new language emerged, and the Hindus spoke Sanskrit. But then a new language emerged, Hindvi, or it was called Hindustani, and eventually it was called Urdu. And it was very beautiful language, more refined than Sanskrit. So Hindus started speaking that as well and started writing poetry in that for Hussein. And that's where the Hindu influence started to come into Azadari. It's a cultural evolution. These Shia were saying Salat, believed in one God and everything. But the cultural aspects of Azadari started to become influenced by the Hindus. And the Hindus, some of the Hindus in those days believed that Ali was an avatar of Vishnu. Now this is a well-researched, what I'm telling you, based on well-researched academic articles. Some of the Hindus started to believe Ali was an avatar of Vishnu. And then in Mahabharata, they had these characters. Rama, his brother Lakshman, good people. Rama's wife Sita, good people. And the bad guy? Who? Come on, Bollywood movies you have all watched. Ravan. Ravan was the bad guy. So they said, okay, the story of Karbala tells us that Hussein is the embodiment of Rama. His brother Abbas is Lakshman. And either Zainab or the wife of Hussein or wives of Hussein are like Sita. And Yazid, the accursed, is a Ravan. That's what they started to believe. And they had their own culture in which they had their own gods and their own replicas of their gods that they would make with out of paper, not stone and wood. And on certain days, they would take them out, and at the end of the day, they would cool them down and take them to Ganges, cool them down. So the Shia started to make replicas with the Zarih, Tabut. They would take them out on Ashura and cool them down at the end of the day. No one should feel offended. This is cultural aspect. Some stupid people with twisted hearts say, Shia, they are like Hindus. Stupid. Your IQ level is so low, you can't understand what I'm talking about. Those takfiri people who say this. No, these are cultural aspects of Azadari. That's it. No one started to worship those ta'ziyas or anything. Another thing that academics say came into Shia was the hand of Abbas from the Hindus. Because Hindus had this symbol, and this symbol exists in different cultures and religions as a manifestation of power and stopping the evil. The Shias adopted it, 5 fingers and 5 holy personalities and Abbas's severed hands. That came from, the academics say, that came into Shia Islam from the Hindus. And some other things that I'll talk about in a bit. That came from the Hindus. Not only that, even the architecture. You see the political influence. The dukes really needed the Hindus. And they needed this harmony. So they created the Bada Imam Bara. They created the big Hussainiya. And it had 12 doors. Baradari is an architectural feature in the architecture of Indian subcontinent. That Baradari means 12 doors. And the Hindus believed in the 12 houses of the sun, and the Shias believed in 12 Imams. So that served a very good purpose for both parties. So that's how the Azadari was influenced. And then we have Ta'ziyah, we have Alam, alam also, according to some academics, the alam, the way we have it in the subcontinent, because Abbas alayhi salam clearly did not have all those things on his alam. And now when we see some processions of the Hindus in India, they have those kind of things, which are very similar to our alams. Again, someone will say, oh, Sayyid Rehan has done Tawheen of Azadari. No, this is an academic discussion. We have taken over those things because we found it attractive. That's it. So what? So what? Nothing. Nothing. Yeah. We don't think it is Vishnu or someone's avatar or something false god. It makes us think of Karbala and Imam Hussain alayhi salam. We take them as a sha'air of Allah, not sha'air of Vishnu or something. The Quran says, I recited verse number 32 of Surah Al-Hajj. ذَلِكَ وَمَنْ يُعَظِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّهَا مِنْ تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. And that is so that whoever respects the signs of Allah does so out of piety of hearts. So when we kiss this alam, it is now ours. Whatever, wherever it came from, doesn't matter. Whatever influenced it, doesn't matter. It is now ours. It makes us think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Hussein, who is Hussein? Waliyullah. For whom did Hussein sacrifice his life? For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is a very superficial thought, that, oh, these things you have taken from Hindus and this and that, so it's bad, it's haram. It's not haram. It's a cultural aspect. In Iran, they have huge taziyas. They have alam type thing. They don't, taziyah in Iran is theatrical play. They call that taziyah. But they have their own versions of heavy alams. They are so heavy, you can't really lift it. And they're often found in Hussainiyas collecting dust throughout the year. They take it out only on 21st of Ramadan al-Mubarak or Ashura and those big occasions. And it has peacock feathers, strange shapes, some water skins. It has nothing, not even closer to alam or anything of battlefield related. But this is what they have adapted from the Zoroastrian culture. And it's okay. No one worships that. No one says, this can give me, fulfill the wishes of my heart. No one does that. No one does that. It's just to help us visualize Karbala according to our culture, because we haven't been there. In those days, no one had been to Karbala. All they could do was to imagine how Karbala took place in their own way. And the same happened with Nauha and Latmiya. In Lucknow, it was the epicenter of Mausiqi, music. So they had a culture of Soz Khani. Now the academics say that also came from the culture of music. Now whether it is Nauha or Latmiya or Marthiya or Soz, Na'at, Hamd, whatever it is, they're all different genres of music. Ilm Mausiqi. Music, don't start thinking about Billie Eilish right away or Taylor Smith. Mausiqi is ilm. It's a genre, how to raise, your voice, when to dip, when to up, when to down. It's ilm mausiqi. So from there, the Soz Khani started, the Nawab started, and it is very similar to the bhajans of the Hindus. When they recite their bhajans, they sound very similar. Similarly, in the Saraiki areas of Pakistan, and Saraiki is the most, okay, I'm biased, but also non-Saraiki people have said it is the most beautiful language for the Azadari and Masa'ib of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. They have a very peculiar way of reciting. Very beautiful. But when you listen to non-religious Saraiki music, they sing exactly the same. Which means it has been adopted and changed and tailored towards Azadari cultural aspect. What's the big deal? No big deal. So maybe in 50, 100 years, today people are trying to recite No Haz using Persian and Arabic and Pakistani Urdu tunes. But maybe in 50, 100 years, it will become more natural and more in line with the hymns sung in the churches. And that will be all right. You won't become mushrik by that. That's a cultural aspect of it. That's it. That's it. So no worries. So this is how things evolve. Whether it is Majlis, Majlis evolved out of necessity for ilm and solutions to our problems. Sinezani, Latmiye, poetry, replicas, all that, they evolve as a result of influence from the culture in which people live. And it's all right. As long as there is no shirk committed. As long as the spirit of Hussein does not go out of the Azadari. But the problem is that when the things that should be kept in the periphery, they are brought to the core, then the spirit of Hussein starts to fade away. And that's exactly what distortion means. That's exactly what distortion means. Now quickly, let's take a look at our rituals. 10 minutes or so and then Masaib. Just condensing it so that you take something home. First, don't worry. Don't worry where the alam came from, where these replicas came from. They are cultural aspects. If someone is not moved by them, it is okay. If someone is moved by them, very good. If someone does Sine Zani Matam, beautiful. If someone does not feel like doing it, it's okay. You don't become a Muqassir or non-Shia. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? It's the love for Hussein. It's very possible someone cries tears of blood, but does not do very hard matam, just does like this, but feels extreme sadness in their heart for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. You'll say, no, that guy does not really do hard matam, that's why he is Muqassir. No. Some other time I'll explain who is Muqassir. Muqassir is not related to even rituals. Rituals are at the periphery. It's not related to rituals. Anyway, so distortion, Majlis. How does the distortion in Majlis take place? How does it do that? First of all, if you take the Masaib out of the Majlis, gone, distorted. These Masaib I've already explained. Tears, spiritual significance, deeper meanings, beyond our imagination. Direct nas from the Imam, cry for Hussein, and it washes away your sins. If you take the emotional aspect of Majlis out of it, it will be reduced to a dry, philosophical, academic exercise. Sit on chairs, sip on cup of tea, watch a PowerPoint presentation, do tajziyah wa tahleel and analysis of Karbala. After that, go home, eat biryani, sleep. That's what will happen. Emotional aspect, extremely important. It moves people's hearts, it softens people's hearts and makes them ready for receiving hidayah and maw'izah. That is also an aspect of azadari, tears, masaib, very important. Second thing, don't take the fadail completely out of Majlis. If we take the fadail, the merits, the virtues of the Ahlul Bayt also out of the Majlis, then it is being distorted. Because why do we come here? To learn about the A'immah, the 14 infallibles, and increase our ma'rifah. And I see, unfortunately, and I said it last year in Arba'in as well in my lectures, I'm really afraid, I fear the direction in which our majlises are moving. And I'm not going to single out any languages because I don't want to stigmatize any community. You think, you observe. The majlises are becoming void of masaib, and also fada'il. And not only that, on top of that, less and less Quran and Hadith. It's becoming more of an entertainment, keep people engaged. More and more like New Age gurus. More and more like motivational speakers. It doesn't have to be like that. We have to strike a balance. Like sometimes discuss those subjects, but don't completely forget about those things. Quran, Hadith, Fada'il, Masaib, very important. Very important. Second thing that can go wrong in majalis is ghuluv and shirk, which happens in certain communities. Instead of this majlis that was supposed to be a place for tawheed, an arena to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has become an arena for ghuluv and shirk and utter nonsense. Distortion shouldn't take place. A majlis, when it becomes an arena for spreading hatred and hate speech so that people do not come to listen to the message of Karbala. Distortion. Before Sunni Muslims, I just told you, Nawab of Awadh Duke, Sunni, Hindu, Buddhist, everyone came to the Majlis of Hussein. Love, inclusivity. Now, if you just do hate preaching and turn people away, you have distorted the Majlis of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. These things should not take place from this arena, from this pulpit. No. Invite people so that they learn about Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So that's very important. These could be different kinds of distortions. Now, another distortion, when the whole focus is on crying. I have just spent quite some minutes explaining. I love eulogies, the significance of crying, how important crying is. But when crying becomes the end in itself, instead of means, that is a bit of distortion, because the A'imma did crying dependent on their times and circumstances. That time they couldn't start, let's analyze Karbala. No, that's very insensitive. They were trying to hide the atrocities committed by the Umayyads. Those were supposed to be brought to the fore. But Hussein also said, Hayhat minna dillah. Hussein also said, do not bow down to oppression. If only the tears becomes the end in itself, then nations start to go towards the decline. They do not have the courage to stand up to their oppressors. And I'm going to say something that some people might find a little bit controversial and maybe offensive, but look at the Shia poetry throughout the history. Especially in the Urdu language, beautiful poetry, extremely beautiful poetry, in details explaining what happened in Karbala, and also sometimes exaggerating, which is mubaligha in ash'ar, which is allowed. That's okay. But when the British came and colonized India and carried out the worst sort of atrocities, especially after the 1857 War of Independence that was quelled by the British, and it was such a big atrocity that the hooves of the horses of the British in Delhi were submerged in blood of Indians. We don't see anything in Shia poetry talking against that atrocity of that time. At least I haven't found. Now, I'm not going to blame those poets. Were great people. They have done great service to Azadari in their circumstances, and they had some very good reasons not to talk about that. We cannot see that. But I'm just saying that if it becomes only for crying, it is possible that we become submissive to the oppressors, because we are only interested in shedding tears, and hayhat minna dillah we have forgotten. that dhillah, disgrace, is away from us. That is part of the spirit of Hussein. And then there are other things they say in Masa'ib, some people, because then the end has become the tears. For tears, everything is allowed. Everything goes, because that has become the end in itself. Everything is allowed, even belittling Hussein. Even belittling Hussein. Some people do that. And I don't want to say those things they say about Imam Hussein alayhi salam, how he was overwhelmed with emotions on that day. Nonsense, all these things didn't happen. This is a distortion. Don't disgrace, don't belittle the Ahlul Bayt, because ashq, tears have become the end in itself. And then another classical distortion on the day of Ashura, in the midst of the battle, when the Imam recited his prayers, Salatul Khawf, the prayers of fear in the time of battle, you don't recite regular, normal salat, you recite Salatul Khawf. At that time, he said, now organize the wedding of Qasim. So much so that now the henna bandi, mehendi, the ritual of henna has become so widespread for Qasim and has with it so many different kinds of haram activities. Isn't that distortion? And you are telling me, don't talk about modern subjects from the pulpit of Hussein. Henna bandi, Qasim. Who was Qasim? Do we even have the ma'rifah of a Qasim? Qasim is the son of Hassan. I will tell you in details. Paying tributes to Qasim and his father Hassan. When Imam Hassan alayhi salam was poisoned upon the orders of Muawiyah, he was on his deathbed. And you know, when poison starts to act, what happens in the body? What kind of pains one goes through? The narration says, 70 pieces of the liver of Hassan came out with a vomit. Son of Zahra, son of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, Hassan. At that moment, when he was on his deathbed, stretching his feet in pain, his brothers and sisters gathered around him. And then Imam Hussein alayhi salam looked at his brother, looked at his Imam. The Imam of Imam Hussein is called Hassan. And he looked at Hassan, and Hassan alayhi salam felt something dripping onto his face. Something dripping. The tears of Hussein. Tears of Hussein. Imam Hassan alayhi salam said, Hussein, don't cry. La yawma ka yawmika ya Aba Abdullah. There is no day like the day of you, like your day, O Aba Abdullah. At that moment, there was a little boy also in that gathering. 2-year-old boy. He didn't really understand what was going on. Qasim. His father was going to leave the world. And after that, who took care of Qasim? Abbas and Hussein. They raised Qasim. the brave son of brave Sardar Hassan, the brave Commander Hassan, Qasim. But according to one narration, before Imam Hassan passed away, he wrote a letter for Qasim, who was only 2 at that time. And in that he wrote, on the day of Ashura, when my brother Hussein will be surrounded by the enemy, go and support him. Sacrifice yourself for Hussein. And gave that letter to the mother of Qasim, according to one narration. Then came the night of Ashura, the night leading to the day of Ashura. Imam Hussein alayhi salam told his companions what was going to happen the next day, that they were going to become martyrs. There was this boy, 13, maybe 14, some say he was 16, some say he hadn't even become baligh yet, sitting in the corner, and he hesitantly says to his uncle, "Uncle, is my name also among the martyrs?" Imam Hussein alayhi salam didn't say yes. Perhaps Hussein did not have the heart to say to the son of Hassan that yes, you are also among the martyrs. But Imam Hussein alayhi salam asked a question. "Dear Qasim, my son Qasim, how do you see death?" Qasim said, "With ma'rifah, with love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." The iman of Qasim, sweeter than honey. Sweeter than honey. The Imam did not say anything to him any further. Then came the day of Ashura. Qasim went to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. "Uncle, please let me go into the battlefield." Imam Hussein wouldn't allow him to go into the battlefield. Then according to one narration, he asked his mother to bring out that letter, the letter of Hassan, and showed that letter to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. "Qasim, help your uncle Hussein. Sacrifice your love, sacrifice your life for Hussein." And according to one narration, Qasim started to kiss the hands and feet of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and started to cry continuously. Then Imam Hussein alayhi salam said to him, "Qasim, come here. Let me prepare you to go into the battlefields." The narrator says, Humayd ibn Muslim, he says, "I saw a boy, kharaja ghulamun." A boy came out of the camp of Hussein, and his face was like moon. And he explains in vivid details. He was wearing a cloak and a belt, and the strap of his left shoe was broken. And as he came into the battlefield, there was an accursed man by the name Umar ibn Sa'd ibn Nufail Azadi. He said with hatred to Humayd ibn Muslim, "I am gonna kill this boy." And Humayd ibn Muslim said to that accursed man, "Why would you do that? There are so many men to kill him." He said, "By God, Wallah, I am going to kill this boy Qasim." So much hatred for the Ahlul Bayt. The narrator says, this accursed man moved forward and he struck Qasim onto his forehead, and Qasim immediately fell onto the ground and he cried out loud, "Ya Amma, oh uncle, please come to help me." The narrator says, I saw that Hussein moved forward like a hawk when it attacks its prey, and like a fierce lion, and attacked that accursed man and severed his arm with which he had hit Qasim. That accursed man yelled and cried out loud in agony and asked for help from his accursed companions. They all rushed forward to help him, but instead they ran him over. The narrator says there was a cloud of dust and no one could see anything. When the dust settled, I saw Hussein next to that boy who was stretching his feet onto the hot plains of Nainawa in pain. And that boy passed away. And Hussein said, how difficult it is for your uncle, O Qasim, that you cried out for help and he couldn't reach in time to help you, O Qasim. Qasim, the son of Hassan, my brother's son Qasim. And you know what? Last sentence, just last sentence. For Qasim, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein alayhi salam did not call anyone to come and help him to carry the body of Qasim. The narrations say Imam Hussein alayhi salam hugged the body of Qasim. Imam Hussein alayhi salam's chest pressed against the chest of Qasim and carried him towards the tent where the bodies of the martyrs were lying. And the narrator says, I saw the feet of Qasim were dragging onto the land of Karbala. The feet of Qasim were dragging onto the land of Karbala. Ala la'natullahi ala al-qawmi al-zalimin. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم وعن أعدائهم أجمعين. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.